Field Marshal Walter von Reichenau was a fanatical Nazi in an aristocrat's uniform. Imagine a general who not only carries out orders, but is also their cruel ideologist. A general whose name is associated not only with resounding military victories, but also with blood-curdling war crimes. Such was Walter von Reichenau, Field Marshal of the Wehrmacht, one of the most sinister and controversial figures in the military leadership of the Third Reich. He was one of the few senior military commanders who openly and enthusiastically supported Nazi ideology, becoming a symbol of ruthlessness on the Eastern Front. Walter von Reichenau was born on October 8, 1884, in Karlsruhe, into the family of a Prussian general, which predetermined his military future. Raised in the traditions of militarism, he began his military service in 1903 and fought in World War I. In the interwar period, he continued his service in the Reichswehr, where his career was closely intertwined with the rise of the Nazi Party. Unlike many of his aristocratic colleagues who looked down on Hitler, Reichenau saw Nazism as a tool for reviving Germany's military power and became close to the Führer as early as 1932. He was the author of the text of the Oath of Allegiance to Adolf Hitler himself, which underscores his key role in forging the alliance between the army and the Nazi regime. With the outbreak of World War II, Reichenau found himself at the forefront of the Wehrmacht's main offensives. Commanding first the 10th and then the 6th Army, he played a central role in the campaigns in Poland and France. His troops participated in the capture of Kiev in September 1941 and Kharkov in October of the same year.
But behind these military successes lay a dark side. Reichenau went down in history as the author of the infamous Reichenau Order of October 10, 1941. This document demanded that soldiers take, quote, cruel but just revenge on the Jewish inferior race, end quote, and called for the merciless destruction of partisans and the civilian population. The order effectively gave soldiers carte blanche to commit war crimes and became the ideological justification for mass killings. In August 1941, Reichenau personally gave the order to shoot a group of Jewish children in the town of Bila Cerkva. He is not just an example of an officer of the old Prussian school, but a vivid testimony to how traditional militarism, merged with Nazi ideology, gave rise to one of the most brutal commanders of World War II. Military career and ideological stance. The path from Kaiser's officer to Nazi executioner. How did an officer raised in the traditions of Prussian militarism become one of the most brutal and ideologically devoted military leaders of the Third Reich? Walter von Reichenau's military career is a story not only of professional growth, but also of a profound ideological transformation that made him the ideal executor of Hitler's criminal will. Having begun his service in the Kaiser's army in 1903, Reichenau went through the harsh school of World War I on the Western Front. After receiving the Iron Cross and valuable staff experience, he continued his career in the Reichswehr, the army of the Weimar Republic, which had been humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles. It was during this period when many German military leaders dreamed of revenge that Reichenau found ideological support in the growing power of Nazism.
Unlike many aristocrats who looked down on Hitler, Reichenau recognized early on that he was a leader capable of reviving Germany's military power. His meeting with Hitler in 1932, arranged by Reichenau's uncle, an ardent Nazi, was a turning point. He not only supported the new regime, but also became its active proponent in the army. Reichenau played a key role in transforming the Reichswehr into the Wehrmacht and was the author of the text of the military oath of allegiance to Adolf Hitler, which symbolically cemented the army's subordination to the Nazi regime. His zeal was duly appreciated. In 1933, he became head of the department in the War Ministry, effectively serving as a liaison between the army and the NSDAP. Reichenau was actively involved in eliminating potential opponents of Hitler in the army and the leadership of the stormtroopers, SA, during the Night of the Long Knives in 1934. With the outbreak of World War II, Reichenau's career reached its peak. At the head of the 10th Army, he successfully operated in Poland and then, commanding the 6th Army, participated in the defeat of France. However, his true nature was revealed on the Eastern Front. Fanatically believing in Hitler's plans to conquer living space and destroy the Jewish Bolshevik system, Reichenau turned his troops into an instrument of genocide. He demanded that his subordinates show no mercy to the civilian population and Soviet prisoners of war. The culmination of his ideological cruelty was the infamous Reichenau Order of October 10, 1941. In this document, which Hitler called exemplary, the war in the East was declared not just a military campaign, but a mission to eradicate Asian and Jewish influence in Europe. The order instructed soldiers to take cruel but just retribution against the inferior Jewish race and to destroy any pockets of resistance regardless of civilian casualties. Supplying the local population and prisoners with food was declared unnecessary humanity, and everything that was a symbol of Soviet power, including historical and cultural treasures, was to be destroyed. Thus, Walter von Reichenau did not simply carry out orders, he was their staunch co-author, turning his army into a machine for committing war crimes.
Reichenau's Order, a manifesto of genocide and a ban on humanity. On October 10, 1941, Walter von Reichenau signed a document that finally erased the moral line between a soldier on the front line and an executioner in a firing squad. This order, sent to all units of the 6th Army, became not just a tactical instruction, but an ideological manifesto that legitimized mass atrocities in the occupied territories. Hitler called it exemplary, and soon similar directives appeared in other Wehrmacht armies. In the text of the document, Reichenau proclaimed that soldiers in the East were not simply fighters according to the rules of military art, but bearers of a merciless national idea. The main goal was declared to be the complete destruction of the Asian Jewish danger. The key thesis of the order sounded like a sentence on entire peoples. Therefore, soldiers must fully understand the need for harsh but just retribution against the inferior Jewish race. The order categorically prohibited any display of compassion. Supplying food to local residents and prisoners of war, even those dying of starvation, was declared unnecessary humanity and a crime against the German people. In effect, the field marshal demanded that his troops share not a single piece of bread with them and offer them no assistance whatsoever. Hunger became the official weapon of the 6th Army. To understand the full horror of this document, imagine the following scene. A dusty road on the outskirts of a captured Ukrainian village, autumn 1941. A Wehrmacht convoy has stopped for a rest. Soldiers sit by the field kitchen, eating hot soup, cutting bread, opening cans of food. A few meters away, local children stand, dirty, in rags, their eyes huge and sunken from hunger. They don't even reach out their hands, they just stare at the food, unable to look away. One of the young soldiers, perhaps remembering his brother or sister at home, reaches for an extra piece of bread to throw to the children. But he is immediately stopped by a sharp shout from a non-commissioned officer. "Remember the commander's order, not a crumb for subhumans." The soldier pulls his hand back, meets the child's gaze for a moment, then turns away and continues chewing. At this moment, in this silence, something more terrible than a gunshot occurs, a moral dehumanization sanctioned from above. This ideology of hatred led to horrific consequences. The most gruesome example of Reichenau's direct involvement in the genocide was the tragedy in the town of Bila Tserkva in August 1941. The SS Sonderkommando shot all the adult Jewish population, but left about 90 children ranging from infants to 7-year-olds alive. They were locked in a building without food or water. After a few days, the cries and screams of the dying children became unbearable even for some German soldiers. Military chaplains tried to save the children by appealing to the command. The report reached the army headquarters. Walter von Reichenau's reaction was unequivocal and merciless. He harshly reprimanded the officers for their soft-heartedness and misunderstanding of the goals of National Socialism, after which he personally ordered the children to be shot immediately. The order was carried out.
This episode forever cemented Reichenau's reputation as a child killer in a field marshal uniform. Consequences and historical memory. A trail of blood and shame. Walter von Reichenau's legacy is not a memoir of military victories, but an indictment written in the blood of his victims. Although the exact number of people who died as a result of his orders and the actions of the Sixth Army is impossible to calculate, historians speak of his direct and indirect responsibility for the extermination of a huge number of Soviet citizens. His troops not only fought in combat, but also actively participated in the Holocaust, providing logistical support and directly assisting the SS Einsatzgruppen. The most horrific example of such collaboration was the tragedy in Babi Yar in Kiev. It was Reichenau's Sixth Army that captured the city, and its units helped organize and carry out the mass shooting of more than 33,000 Jews on September 29-30, 1941. The Reichenau Order, issued just 10 days later, effectively legalized such atrocities, calling them severe but just retribution. This document became an indulgence for mass killings, provoking a wave of violence across the Eastern Front. Reichenau died of a stroke in January 1942, avoiding the dock at the Nuremberg trials. However, his name and his criminal orders appeared in the tribunal's materials as evidence of the criminal nature of the war waged by the Wehrmacht. Unlike some other German generals who tried after the war to create a myth about a pure Wehrmacht that allegedly only fought on the front lines, Reichenau's figure leaves no room for double interpretations. He was a staunch Nazi and war criminal, whose military talents were put to use in the service of genocide. In post-war historical memory, Walter von Reichenau has firmly established himself as a symbol of the cruelty and moral decline of the German military elite. His military successes, such as the capture of Paris, Kiev, and Kharkiv, have been forever overshadowed by his crimes. Debates about the responsibility of individual Wehrmacht commanders continue, but the assessment of Reichenau is unequivocal. He was not just a soldier blindly following orders, but one of the ideologues and architects of the war of extermination in the East. His legacy is a grim reminder of how easily military valor can become a tool of mass murder when driven by an inhuman ideology.